When a character we love seemingly loses their life, it's always heartbreaking. I bet you cried when Bing Bong sacrificed himself in Inside Out.
Sorry, we wanted to make such a good first impression.
But do you know which characters everyone thought were dead, but were actually alive?
It's impossible.
Is it?
It couldn't be.
Couldn't it?
Are you?
Bluey isn't the kind of action show where characters are constantly fighting dangerous villains. Instead, it's all about Bluey and her family's simple but fun daily lives. Still, several episodes tackle heavy topics, like death. For instance, in Copycat, Bluey and her dad find a lifeless bird, and for the first time, Bluey has to process grief. Because of this, many fans believe the show might revisit this theme in an even more emotional way later on, particularly with Grandpa Bob, Bluey's grandpa, who went missing from the series after the Grannies episode in Season 1, his debut alongside Bandit. After that, Grandpa Bob was only mentioned or seen in photos. You're probably connecting the dots now, right? Grandpa Bob's strange absence led many fans to believe he had passed away due to some medical condition after his last appearance. This theory gained even more traction after the bedroom episode, where Bingo says, "Good night, Grandpa, wherever you are." But to our surprise, this theory was debunked in The Sign. It turns out Grandpa Bob's disappearance wasn't sad at all. He was just traveling in India. Who could have seen that coming? It almost feels like the show was trying to trick us. Whether that was intentional or not, today you'll discover the 8 characters that everyone thought were gone for good. So jump into this wave, because Cinewave is starting. One of the franchises where this happened is Despicable Me. At the end of the first movie, after an epic showdown with Gru, Vector gets launched into space and ends up stranded on the moon. He didn't die immediately because he had an oxygen bubble around his head. Without it, he would have suffocated, a fate Illumination likely wanted to avoid showing in a family film. But let's be honest, everyone assumed Vector wouldn't last long up there. I mean, he only had a little oxygen in that bubble and no food, unless you count the minion that accidentally ended up on the moon with him. Illumination strongly implied that Vector's days were numbered. However, the studio proved us wrong. Vector reappears in an animated short featuring him as the star, trying to escape the moon, only to end up on Mars instead. Of course, this didn't improve his situation much, and since the short takes place right after the first movie, it didn't really confirm that he survived for much longer. But in the final moments of Despicable Me 4, we see that somehow Vector managed to return to Earth, though he's now in prison, so he's very much alive. Will he break out in Despicable Me 5? If there's one franchise filled with epic battles and over-the-top villains, it's Sonic. In the second movie, the world's fastest Hedgehog uses the Chaos Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic. Needless to say, Dr. Robotnik stood no chance against such a powerful opponent and lost the battle, even with his giant robot. In the end, he fell from such a height that any ordinary person would have been turned into a squish pancake. But a villain as iconic and charismatic as Robotnik couldn't be written off so easily. There was speculation he might be gone for good, especially since Jim Carrey, who plays Robotnik, has a reputation for avoiding sequels. The fact that he appeared in the second installment was already a rarity, so many thought a third film was out of the question. That's what everyone assumed. But luckily, we now know Robotnik will return in Sonic 3, still portrayed by Jim Carrey. Somehow, the mad scientist survived that massive fall and is back, even teaming up with Sonic this time, at least for now. Jim Carrey must have enjoyed playing this role, and thank goodness for that. Otherwise, Robotnik might have really ended up as mashed potatoes after that humiliating defeat. If you're excited to see Robotnik and Sonic working together in the next movie, leave a comment below with #Eggman. What's funny about Robotnik is that he wasn't the only one in the Sonic franchise who seemed to have died, only to come back to life. In fact, the protagonist himself went through the same thing at the end of the first movie in the saga. During the battle with Dr. Robotnik, Sonic gets hit hard by the villain ship, and all the other characters think the Hedgehog has met his end right there and then. Fortunately, they were all wrong. Sonic gets back up, much to everyone's surprise, more powerful than ever, and manages to defeat Robotnik once and for all. In the first Sing movie, one of the many singers introduced is Mike, a super stylish but incredibly greedy mouse. Towards the end of the movie, Mike and his girlfriend get captured by the Bear Gang, and we're left wondering what happens to them. But one thing's clear, the bears wanted to get rid of Mike, and maybe even eat him. So when Sing 2 came out without Mike's return, pretty much everyone assumed the worst, that the little mouse was either 6 feet under, or worse, digesting in the leader of the Bear Gang's stomach. But once again, we jump to conclusions. Recently, Illumination and Netflix teamed up to release a short Halloween special in the Sing universe titled Sing Thriller. In the short, various citizens are shown attending the new musical at Buster Moon's theater. Among the crowd, we see some familiar faces, and two of those are Mike and his girlfriend. This means the pair survived the encounter with the bear somehow. They've been laying low all this time, possibly out of fear of being caught again or something along those lines. How to Train Your Dragon is a spectacular animation, so much so that it's getting a live-action adaptation. Will this new version manage to surpass the original? If the film stays as faithful to the original as promised, we're likely to see a very emotional scene at the end. In the original movie, Hiccup and Toothless engage in an epic battle against the Red Death. Although they succeed in defeating the powerful dragon, it comes with consequences. Toothless is later found alone and gravely injured. When Hiccup's father sees the dragon without his son, he assumes Hiccup lost his life in the fight, and it's a heartbreaking moment. But then, Toothless spreads his wings, and we realize Hiccup survived, having been shielded by his dragon and best friend. However, there were still consequences. Hiccup lost one of his legs during the battle and had to get a prosthetic to replace it. This is a heavy moment, but it's also impressive that they had the courage to include it. It's so common in animated movies for characters to walk away from epic battles without a scratch, but How to Train Your Dragon chose to make it more realistic and impactful. Before we move on to the next characters, how about hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications? That way, you'll never miss our best videos about your favorite animated shows and movies. Toy Story is full of amazing toys, like Woody and Rex. I mean, who didn't want a Buzz Lightyear figure growing up? Anyway, one of the most beloved characters in the franchise is Bo Peep, the porcelain doll who serves as Sheriff Woody's love interest. She's been part of the story since the very first movie, which is why fans were surprised when she completely vanished without explanation in Toy Story 3. Many people believe Bo Peep had been destroyed off screen. This seemed like the only explanation for her sudden disappearance, but thankfully, Toy Story 4 brought her back and gave us a very different reason for her absence. As it turns out, she had been donated and passed through several owners over the years until she eventually broke free and reunited with Woody. Her journey is explored further in the short film Lamp Life. The real reason behind Bo Peep's absence, however, has to do with a more practical matter. In the climactic scene of Toy Story 3, one of the most emotional moments in animation history, all of Andy's toys are nearly incinerated and must find a way to escape. While we know they survive, Bo Peep wouldn't have made it. Being made of porcelain, a fragile material, she would have shattered from the intense heat long before reaching the flames. To avoid such a grim fate, the filmmakers wrote her out by saying she was donated. Otherwise, she would have been reduced to shards in the incinerator alongside the other toys. A truly cruel ending. I'd rather not think about that. Lord Farquaad, the villain from the first Shrek movie, is undoubtedly one of the most detestable characters in animated history. So the film didn't hold back when it came to giving him a fittingly cruel fate. He was swallowed whole by the dragon. The only thing that escaped her mouth was his crown. At this point, it's safe to assume he died the instant he was eaten by Donkey's wife. However, in one of the Shrek shorts, we learn the story didn't end there. During a swamp party, Lord Farquaad makes a shocking appearance, still alive, but trapped inside the dragon's belly. It's remarkable that he didn't die instantly after being swallowed. That said, this doesn't mean Farquaad stayed alive for much longer. After all, he was likely digested not long after the scene. And even if he wasn't, there's no way he could have survived for years with no access to food or water. Of course, since it's a comedy, the writers could find a way to explain his survival, just like Illumination found a way to bring Vector back to Earth. However, this seems unlikely when you remember Farquaad later appears as a ghost in Shrek. This confirms he was indeed alive when we initially thought he died, but thankfully, his second chance at life didn't last long. This video is coming to an end, but we've left 2 awesome recommendations on your screen. If you want to keep the fun going, just pick one and enjoy. Thanks, and see you next time.